Welcome to the Second Stage channel. Today we're going to be fabricating a roll cage. There's going to be some bending of tube, there's going to be notching of tube, there's going to be welding of tube. So if you've always wondered what it takes to actually build a cage, you're on the right video. Hope you enjoy. Hey, it's Tommy Dunk House. I need to finish this cage in this Corolla of mine, in the drift van. We did the back half, front needs to be done, so I need some materials. So I'm going to head out to see Speedway Steve. He's got some tubes, some cold drawn seamless tubing for making roll cages. So we'll head out there and grab that off him. So Speedway Steve's a dude. Got us all this lovely roll cage tube. It's 1.5 inches. It's cold drawn seamless. It's very nice to work with. It's a really good grade mild steel. So that's fantastic. So we've got that ready to go. I just had the drift van out the front there, and I've given it a really good clean out. So compressed air, there's a lot of stuff in the chassis rails here, a lot of dirt in the back, and so yeah, she's just nice and clean to get started on the roll cage. Got this plate here mounted in the floor of my workshop, so I cut the concrete out, and this bit of plate's like 16mm plate with some nuts welded onto the back of it, and that lets me mount my roll cage bender to the floor, and when I'm done with it I can pack it away again, so it's out the way. So I'll go grab the bender and I'll bolt it down. This is easily one of my most favourite tools that I have in the shop. I don't get to use it nowhere near as much as I would like, but when it comes out I get a bit excited because I like it. It's really well made, really well designed, lots of cool little ideas that make it just a really nice tool to use. So it's got the 1 3/4 die in at the moment, so I'm going to swap it out for the 1.5 inch because that's the material that we'll be doing the rest of the cage in. So 1 3/4 just for the main hoop, the rest is 1.5 inch, so get the die swapped out. So as you start bending tube, you have this indicator to tell you how many degrees that you're bending. I've designed this really well that you can just use a piece of welding rod. So this is the supplied piece that came. I've got the other welding rod on my other die, so I'm making a second one now so I don't have to keep swapping it all the time. And it's pretty straightforward. I'm going to have an indicator like that. So it's not rocket surgery. What we can do there, let's get it set just right. There you go. As I start to bend the tube, I can then stop. This gives me a nice way to be very repeatable with our bends. So there we go, tube bender all set up. It's a really nice bit of gear. I do enjoy using it. So I'm going to go start taking some measurements and we'll look at bending up the front legs. So today I'm going to be making the front leg. It's going to go from the hoop here, follow the roof, and then bend down and follow the front A pillar, and then comes down to the mount that the boys made quite a while ago actually. So these are all ready to go. Now when I'm building this cage, I want to actually run the tube as close as I can to the body, snug it up nice and tight. These Corollas are actually pretty small, so by the time you put a race seat in them and you have a helmet on, if you don't build the cage nice and close to the body, you're really encroached by the cage, and your helmet hits the top of them and your elbows hit the side. So it's really important on these smaller cars to snug it up and give yourself as much room as possible. So where I want to come down, these brackets here are in the way, so I'm going to take these off, and they're just spot welded in place. So I've got a special drill bit here that is designed just to drill out the spot weld and not put a hole through the back panel. So I'm going to take these brackets off. So there we go. 2 brackets roughly off. I'll grab the grinder, we'll clean it up a little bit, and I'm going to chuck a bit of paint on there because once the cage is in, it's going to be a bit tricky to get in there with some paint. So get onto that. So brackets are off. I've sort of cleaned this whole corner up, and I'll just get some primer on it before we get started. It's a bit empty actually. Right, so now I'm going to measure up the cage. This is a tool that I made when I first got the bender. And this line here is like a datum that I use on my die when I'm bending tube. So what I need to work out here is where I need to bend and then figure out the length from there. So like I was explaining before, I want this piece of tube as high as I can. Now this is what's called a high roof panel van, so actually an A71. The K70s, the roofs are a bit lower, so I actually have a fair bit more room up here to play with, which is excellent because there's nothing worse than bashing your helmet on a cage while you're in a race car. It's never enjoyable. So I'm going to try and get that bit of tube to sit nice and high like that, so it's going to give me plenty of head clearance once the race seat's in position, and puts me in a nice spot to weld on the corner of the roll cage there. So what I do from there is I know my height and I run this along to where the bend touches the body, and then that marker there, that's where I need to start bending in the bender to get that to start. So what I've done is I've made a mark here on the body, so I can start my measurements from the main roll hoop to there. I'll get that measurement, and then that's where I do my first bend. So I know where to start bending. Now I need to know how much. So I get the old protractor. There's lots of different sort of places that I could eyeball from. You know, I could come from here, sort of come from that top line there, but after a while you just sort of get an eye on where the tube's going to go and what it's going to look like. So I'm coming from pretty high up. The tube's going to be like that there. It actually ends up being 38 degrees. We do the same down here. One way to look at it is from here we've bent the next bend, because this is a 90-degree bend. We could just work it out with maths really. So we can just go 90 minus that 38-degree bend that we did before. This one should be 52. So then your two bends equal 90 degrees. Spent the last 5 minutes just measuring both degrees, because when I come along the top here and I finish going up and down there, it should be a 90-degree angle. So my two measurements, my 2 degrees, should end up being 90 in the end. So what I've ended up with is 40 degrees at the top here, and then a 50 degree down the bottom there, and that gives me my 90. So that gives me my 90-degree angle there by adding those two up. Now here's the trick. This is why I think these front legs are the trickiest part of a cage, because they're not straight. So if you look at the front of a car, a windscreen's never straight, it kicks out a bit. So I'm going to grab the camera, we'll go to the front of the car, and you can see that angle that I'm talking about. As you can see here, that front A-pillar doesn't come straight towards us, it actually kicks away. So if we were to go over to the bender and put 2 bends in a piece of tube and have them in the same plane, then the cage is going to actually run out here like that. The cage will actually run out here like this. It won't bend like that and follow the A-pillar. So we need to find that degree. So this angle is always a little bit tricky to measure. Requires a bit of eyeballing. If you've got a wicked tool that you use to measure this, please let me know, because I'm still using the protractor. But it's about 12 degrees. That's sort of what I'm going to run. So yeah, you need to make sure that you put that offset in when you bend the second bend. I bought myself a nice new flash tape measure because I felt like spoiling myself, and I've done a quick little drawing. So we've marked the actual shell itself of where we're going to go, so I'll measure that up and get the drawing done. Okay, so there's my drawing. 485 to the first bend, and then as the bend finishes, that's where I choose to measure the next part from there to the next bend, 660, and then that will give me here. I've already cut the length of this leg and given myself a bit of extra overrun, and what I do down the bottom is, because we've got it sitting on a platform down there, I'll just sit the cage next to it and then I'll lop it off exactly where it wants to sit rather than trying to measure it. So I'll get it exactly where I want and then cut it to suit. So there we go, we've got all our measurements with our 12-degree offset for the A-pillar there. All we've got to do is chuck it in the bender and get it done. This is the fun bit where I need to get the offset right before I bend the second leg. Now, my normal angle meter that I use, just every time I use it, it just falls to pieces and I'm sick of it. I should buy another one. I was at the tool store this afternoon and I didn't buy one, so we're on to the good old phone. So with this app here, that's at 90 degrees, and we need this to be 12 degrees less. There we go, I've got a 78, so that's our offset there. Now I can do the second bend. I'm pretty happy with that. We'll need to trim the bottom to fit the right size, but looks pretty good. I'm touching the whole way along here, touching all the way down there. So that's the driver's side front leg. Because I've got all my measurements, the other side's going to be the same, so I can just get stuck into making that straight away. Same thing, I've got to take all the brackets off and just prep that corner while I've got the access, and bend in the other tube. So I've worked out one, the other side's exactly the same. It's just a matter of banging out the second one. So cage is moving along nicely. You've got the two front legs tacked in, the first cross piece tacked in. Made this top part here. It's got a couple of bends in it. We're about to notch it. I'll notch it out and tack it in place. So let's get that notched. So I've been powering on. That top bar's in now. Have a quick look. So there we go. Top bar's in. I've also done two of the diagonals at the back. Them there going up to the centre of the crossbar. Now there's a reason I chose to do those two diagonals going to the centre of the crossbar, and that's so that I can run a overhead bar from the top right corner to the centre. So I've got one of them all notched up. I'll show you that. So here's that bar. It's got a 20-degree bend in it. Bit of a fancier notch to fit into the corner, and it goes about there. To run a bar in this orientation, you have to have those diagonal bars going to the center of the main roll hoop. According to the cam's schedule, if you want to run a bar that way, you've got to have those diagonals at the back. So if you don't have the diagonals going to the back there, you have to run the bar that way, like that. So one reason I wanted to give this orientation a go is I haven't made a cage like this before, so that was a good excuse in its own. But also I feel like having it run from the center of the main bar there over to this corner gives you a bit of a pocket there for the top of your helmet. So I've been in other cars where they run the other way and my helmet was constantly hitting that bar because it was directly over the top of your head. Whereas in this orientation, it's a little bit offset, which I'm hoping will give me plenty of helmet clearance, which I think it will. So yeah, one reason, I haven't done it before, and two, a little bit of helmet clearance. So this one's all notched up. I want to get the other one done so I can get those tacked in. This bar here involves a little bit more creativity because I want it to sit it right in the corner there. So you've got to kind of notch it to the front leg and also to that front cross brace that's in there. So it's kind of like 2 notches into the corner. So it takes a little bit of eyeballing, and I just sort of took my time with the other one and did some cuts and then sorted the rest out with the flap wheel. I like to get that corner reasonably close before I mark the back there, because obviously the closer in that goes changes the depth of that notch there. So I'm going to draw this up and do some rough cuts, and then I'll start getting it in there with the flap wheel. So I did a couple of cuts, a little bit of linishing with the flap wheel. So I'm getting there. It still needs a fair bit of work, but I've currently got the tube sitting on top there, so it's going to change the angle by a good 30-40 mil when that drops down to where it needs to be. So I'll mark that up now, we'll notch that, and then we can start working the 2 joins and get them nice and neat together. So this is what we're trying to achieve. So that's the angle that we got, and then we actually mark our third there. And that's the cut like that. That's what we need to do to achieve something similar to that. So after lots of fettling about with the linisher, we've got our 2 notches all done. Now I'm going to give this a whiz on the belt cleaner there, make it nice and shiny, clean it with acetone, and I'll tack it into the cage. And then we have roof bars tacked in. I'm actually really happy with that. Really happy with how that turned out. Looks quite lovely. And I wanted a bar that went from this corner over to here. Because for me, the scariest crash in a car is probably tilting over and landing with all your force here. Because the way that the bars are bent, force there is just going to want to come straight down. And I've seen some pretty ordinary photos of race cars where this front leg's just buckled, and that's not really ideal. So for me, to have another piece there, if you were to have a big hit there, you're pushing a lot of forces now through that bar rather than just wanting to just come straight down into where you're sitting in the driver's seat. So that was sort of the other reason I wanted to do that configuration there. So move on to I need to do a cross bar in the middle of the main hoop. So hindsight's a beautiful thing. To do this crossbar here, I'm following the rule book, the CAM's rule book on building cages, and from my platform, the 2 rules that are important is I have a continuous bar that goes to the top of the driver's head, and then if you're choosing to do a cross, which I am, because being a drift car I'm going to run lots of passengers, that's the one that you cut. So that's one rule. The other rule is from this base plate here, it can't be any more than 100 millimeters. Now, for me to go from there, technically the other side there, to above the driver's head with a continuous piece, I can't like notch it to this piece here, so this has got to come out, which is a bit of a pain because that's what my suspension's mounted from. So what's going to happen is I'm going to have to take this out, I'll put my continuous bar in, and then I'm going to have to notch this bar to go around the crossbar so I can mount my suspension point back on again. So, I mean, I might even be able to take that out and build these into the body maybe. Either way, it's got to come out so I can do my continuous cross piece. so now I've got that bar out the way, I'm going to measure up a continuous bar that goes to above the driver's head. So that's important to meet with the rules, that bar is continuous. And from this base plate here, it needs to be minimum of 100 mil above. My minimum mark, I can't be any higher than that. I can't be up here somewhere. It has to be there or below. So, I might actually come in below where this one comes in. Come in down here. And we'll get that measurement. So from bar to bar's 1360. But obviously we need to have a little bit longer for the notching. There we go. Starting to look like a roll cage. Done a real quick notch on the end here that's going up into the curve, but I've also got this bar coming over. I'm meeting directly into there, so the notch will need to take into account this bar also. So I'm just going to play around with the grinder to make it fit, and then when I'm close I'll mark up this end and do the same down there. So after a little bit of messing about with the flap wheel, got quite a nice fit on both my notches, so just a little bit more prep on them and I'll tack them in place. So my cross piece has been all prepped properly and all cleaned up, ready to go. Before I get too carried away, it's going to be easier to run a couple of these welds before the bar's in. So I'll whiz them up real quick. I made up this piece here. Very similar notches, well basically exactly the same notches, so they're pretty straightforward because I kind of knew the dimensions. Got a mark here to make sure that my centre line is the same as the other side, and I drew a straight cross up and gave me a centre line up here to match up. So I'll tack that in place now. So there we go, good chunk of the roll cage fabrication out the way. Obviously there's still heaps to go, you can look forward to that in the next video. If you're building something cool or you have a car that you really love, I'd love to check it out. Please send me a snap at secondstage86. Instagram, Facebook, we're there. If you like short form stuff, I actually do a fair bit on TikTok, so check that out as well. You're a mad lad, so clearly you're already subscribed to my channel, but if you got mates that you think would enjoy it, please, I'd appreciate it if you sent it through to them. So I hope you're having fun watching the build on the Corolla drift van here. I'm enjoying building it and enjoying making these videos, so stay tuned for more. Have a great one everybody, and thanks for watching.